recording. We'll switch to webcam only. Oh geez, what is going on here?
I'm gonna bring the little thing, the little arm.
This is not
for
acceptable.
Would you like a little arm
Yes.
for that?
Yes,
I
we
have
would.
One.
We would love one. Okay. We're already recording. All right. Welcome everyone to 801 Labs. We're super excited to have you here. I get a big double thumbs up from Whitney. Oh, this is good. We have Alex Henry here. We know him as Taco Singularity. I call him Taco Tuesday. I don't know if he likes that, but it's what happens.
Discrimination.
Okay. He's going to talk to us about wine. Alex, you've been a wine developer or have contributed code to wine for how many years now?
About 10 and a half years.
10 and a half years. All right, that's super awesome. Well, so we have the right person here to talk to us about it. Very excited. Before we get into our class, I want to remind everyone that we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So all the classes you guys are getting for free. You're not paying for it. You're either here in person or you're watching on YouTube or on Discord. But we do have to pay for things. Like we have to pay for the space where we're at. We have to pay for electricity and the different things that we use to run the space. So if you could consider giving us a donation, we would really appreciate that. The way to donate to us is to go to every.org/801labs or just go to our website, 801labs.org, and just hit that little donate button. We appreciate it. It helps us do this because nobody gets paid and we need to pay for things. Anyways, I will turn the time over to Alex, and we're super excited to have you. So,
All right, well, as Bash said, my name is Alex Henry. You can find me on Discord as Taco Singularity. And
not Tuesday.
This is the first presentation I've ever given at 801 Labs, so I'm a little bit nervous, and if any of you have questions, please feel free to interrupt. Okay. So let's start off by talking about the history of wine. The earliest known traces of wine are from Georgia, circa 6000 BC, Iran, 5000 BC, and Sicily, 4000 BC. The English word wine comes from the Proto-Germanic winam, an early borrowing from the Latin vini. Georgian, can't pronounce, and they're all derived from the Proto-European stem, vino. Interestingly, it's a cognate with the ancient Greek winos, from which we get our English word winology, the study of wine. And how did that slide get in there? Okay, so the actual history of the wine that we're talking about today. I don't know the exact moment when this idea occurred to someone. I imagine that it was like a great work of Russian literature where some guys are sitting around a table drinking vodka and then one of them says to another, "Hey, I've got an idea. What if we ran Windows programs on Linux?" Wine, this kind of wine is not thousands of years old, but this project started in 1993. It was called the Wine Project essentially from the beginning. I think it was a play on words of Win, which was a common abbreviation used when talking about Windows things. How I got into wine is actually I was looking for a good text editor, and I tried out a bunch of different Linux text editors. I didn't like any of them, and I thought, well, why don't I just use Notepad++? Because I liked that. It should run on Linux through Wine, right? So I ran it. All the basic features worked, but there was a really annoying bug where when you tabbed between different files, the tab indicator dialog would stay open, and it was just really annoying to me. So I thought, well, Notepad++ is open source, Wine is open source, I should be able to figure out what's going on here. And by looking through the Notepad++ source code and looking through the wine source code, I eventually figured out what it was doing that wine wasn't able to handle correctly. Figured out how to fix it, sent a patch, it got accepted, and that little dopamine hit got me really excited, and I wound up writing lots and lots of patches after that for many other Windows applications. And of course, I have to mention, I am an Arch Linux user. Arch Linux is the best kind of Linux. So you can run Wine on any Linux distribution. Everything you're going to see in this presentation is running on my laptop, which is running on Arch. Just so you know. So what is Wine not? Wine is not an emulator, not a virtual machine, and not a container. So does anybody know what the difference is between an emulator, a virtual machine, and a container?
Is an emulator emulating the hardware?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so an emulator creates a virtual CPU and has the whole state machine for the CPU and registers and pretends to run code, but there's not actually like a silicon machine running it directly. It's all happening through some kind of C code that makes like different locations in memory registers, for example, or responds to different opcodes in similar ways to a real CPU.
Like if you want to run a different architecture, like ARM on x86 or something.
Yeah, so if you want to switch architectures, you absolutely have to use an emulator. And that's why I have a Game Boy here as the emulator example, because all of your, all of your programs that let you run Nintendo games that pretend to be gaming consoles, they are all emulators because Nintendo didn't make any x86 gaming consoles. So then a virtual machine, well, I would say that an emulator is a kind of virtual machine, but when people...
It's very specific, right?
Yeah, but it's a specific kind. The more common type of virtual machine is a hypervisor, where it is running on the actual CPU pretty directly, but there's some sort of CPU support for isolating what hardware it has access to. So it can't touch the host operating system that is what you would normally use on the computer. And then a container it has the most shared with the host operating system of the three. So a container shares the running kernel, but then replaces the user space. So when you're running something in Docker, you're running it with the exact same version of the Linux kernel that the host machine is running, and the Linux kernel is what takes care of isolating what's running in the container from what's running on the host. All right. That makes sense so far?
So it's none of those things.
Yes, exactly. So you can forget all of that now because it is none of those things. Okay, so what is Wine exactly? So I mentioned that it lets you run Windows programs on Linux, but how does it do that? Well, it's a PE and NE binary loader for starters. Does anybody know what PE and NE are?
Portable execution format, and I don't know what the other one is.
Non-portable.
That's funny. Yes, the first one is portable executable. The second one is new executable. PE is what Windows uses now. NE is what Windows 3.1 used. So this is a great example of why you shouldn't call your technology new, because nothing is new forever.
Like Windows NT.
Yeah. So if you're running a program on Linux, normally that program is going to be stored in ELF format, executable in linker format, and in macOS they use Macho. All of these formats are file formats for program code, like compiled program code. And the reason why you need a file format for that is because you need some metadata along with the code. You can't just run the code directly. You need to know what libraries does it depend on and need to link to. what kind of address space does it expect to be set up with? Like, where does it expect things to be located in memory? Stuff like that. So you can't just, run a flat file on a modern operating system.
When you're saying it like needs to reference libraries, are you talking about the built-in Windows libraries, or like,
Yeah.
or like the libraries in the Venn or whatever, like virtual environment or whatever? Or?
DLL files.
I'm not sure what you mean by virtual environment, but yes, it's referencing DLL files. That's the kind of library I'm talking about. And every program has to have some bit of metadata that says which libraries it's expecting, what versions of them, where it wants them to be in memory, things like that. So the first thing that Wine has to do is it takes one of these PE format binaries and it loads it into memory. So performing the same function that something else would perform for an ELF binary. But then we have a big problem where all of these programs want DLLs that are present on Windows, but obviously they're not going to be there on Linux because Linux has a completely different architecture and set of libraries. So Wine has to provide its own implementations of all of these Windows DLLs so that all of the functions that the programs expect are there, and then the implementations of those functions don't necessarily have to be the same as what the Windows functions do, because ultimately, you call a function, it calls another function, and at the bottom of the stack it calls a syscall, which goes into the kernel, and then the kernel messes with the hardware in some way, like displays something on the screen or plays a sound or makes a network request or whatever. And so all of the stuff that's specific to the Windows kernel obviously isn't going to be there anymore because it's going to go down to the Linux kernel instead. Relatedly, Wine also has a Wine server, which is kind of like the Windows kernel. It handles all of the Windows-specific inter-process communication. So there's a lot of things where the Wine DLLs can basically just talk to the Linux kernel and have the Linux kernel do things, but if Wine needs to be managing or keeping track of what's happening between different processes, then those function calls have to call into the Wine server, and then the Wine server can keep track of that state and possibly call stuff in the Linux kernel as well. So in this diagram on the right, I have in blue the things that belong to the program you're trying to run. I have here one exe and one DLL that it's brought along with it. And then the red DLLs are the ones that it expects to be there on Windows that Wine provides. Wine server is also in red because Wine provides that too. And finally at the bottom you've got the Linux kernel itself. All right, clear as mud?
It's good.
Okay. So why is Wine? Why would anyone want to do this?
Play games?
Yes. Yes, play games on Linux. It's a great use case. Why else might somebody want to do this?
Microsoft Word?
Okay.
Does they want a Notepad++?
Yeah.
They want to use programs that aren't available on their operating system.
Okay. Yes, that is the big reason. I have a couple more reasons that I'm going to tell you that you probably wouldn't have thought of. For starters, yes, you can ditch your Windows VM. You don't have to actually run things on Windows anymore. What?
Sometimes it's faster to run it in Wine than in Windows VM.
Yes, it is. We're going to get to that in a second.
Oh.
It's okay. Bash didn't know what the presentation was going to be. So because Wine is open source, it gives you the freedom to fix bugs and add features. So it gives you more control over your computer. And interestingly, Wine often has better compatibility with old software than Windows does. In particular, if you have an old 16-bit program, like a program for Windows 3.1, you cannot run a 16-bit program on 64-bit Windows. but you can run a 16-bit Windows program on 64-bit Linux with Wine.
So all those old games we could play.
Exactly, yeah. So even games that you would not be able to play on Windows without a virtual machine, you can keep playing them on Linux.
Like some really funny ones.
Yep. So
Police Quest.
another interesting thing is Wine lies to every application that it runs, and it tells the application that it is running as an administrator even when it's not. So if you have a particular program that really wants to run as an administrator and you really don't want to run it as an administrator, you can run it in Wine, and as long as it doesn't actually need to do anything administrative on your host Linux machine, which it probably won't, it will run just fine. And occasionally, as Bash mentioned, you can sometimes get better performance out of Wine than Windows. And I have a video here that I would like to show you guys.
That was surprisingly smooth for a demo.
Okay, so this is BioShock Infinite, and it's some screenshots that compare it running on Windows and on Linux. All right, let's get started. So top left here, we have Wine running on Vulkan. Top right is Wine running with OpenGL. Bottom right is Windows running OpenGL. And you can see that on the top left, we are getting about 60 frames per second or more. Bottom right, we are only getting, well, it just improved, but it's definitely less than you're getting on Wine.
21.
So I'm not sure if it's possible now to run this game with Vulkan on Windows. I think when this video was made, it was not possible. But you can see quite clearly you're getting a smoother video, better textures, more detail with Wine in the top left than you are getting with Windows in the bottom right.
So that's wrapping DirectX into Vulkan.
Yes, so it's taking the DirectX calls and translating them to Vulkan.
And because Vulkan is better than DirectX, it runs a lot faster with this particular game.
Essentially, yeah. So, I mean, it's not always the case, but it's cool that there are at least some cases where Linux is just better for gaming. All right. So, I need to talk about the different wine flavors, derivatives, other stuff that you're going to hear about. I know that this is really confusing for people who try to use wine for the first time because they hear these words and don't know what they mean. So vanilla wine is what the Wine Project puts out as their main thing. And this is a mistake in my presentation that I'm going to fix very, very fast right now. All right, so vanilla wine does not have experimental patches or hacky patches. It does not come with any programs to help you install Windows programs. It's just assumed that their own Windows installers will work. Doesn't cost any money, and it's open source. Wine staging didn't used to be part of the Wine Project, but it is now. It has a bunch of experimental patches that hopefully will one day be incorporated into vanilla wine. Wine Tricks is not like the first two. Wine Tricks just provides you with a convenient way to install programs and to install Microsoft libraries. So a lot of those DLL files that are present on Windows can actually just be downloaded from Microsoft.com, and Wine Tricks will automate the process of downloading them and installing them in your wine bottle. Crossover is basically a commercial version of Wine. It has some experimental patches. It also has some very hacky patches, and it has a nice program that will help you install programs that have installers that wouldn't otherwise work on Wine. But it does cost money, and if I understand correctly, the patches that it applies on top of Wine are open source. They have to be because Wine is copyleft. But the installer program that helps you install software, I do not believe that is open source. Play on Linux, kind of similar to Crossover, has experimental patches, has hacky patches, has a setup front end, doesn't cost money. Lutris is a little more like Wine Tricks. It gives you an easy way to install programs, but it doesn't actually modify the Wine source code, at least as far as I know. And then finally, the one that you've probably heard of is Proton. Proton is the version of Wine that is integrated into Steam. If you just download and run the Linux version of Steam, it will automatically use Proton to play Windows games on Linux. And this is super cool. It works super smoothly because it's all integrated into the Steam store. And it has some of its own hacky patches. But hey, you know, at least it doesn't cost anything, and it works really, really smoothly. Okay, so I wanted to show you an actual example of what is in Crossover. So I told you that it has hacky patches. Well, this is some hacky code that Crossover adds to Wine. And they even have a comment here saying this is a hack. So what this is doing essentially is it's looking for this particular string, install PDF driver. And if it sees that string, it's probably a setup action. I'm sorry, I didn't look at this too closely. But if it sees that, it just skips it. Okay? And does nothing. So your PDF driver for Quicken 2015 is not going to work on Crossover. But at least Quicken 2015 works because the PDF driver, not being present, now can't crash. All right?
This is a hack.
Yes. All right. So this is a hack. This kind of thing would break any other application, and so they've made an exception for this one particular program, changed the way that the Wine DLLs work just for this one case. Okay, Proton has some really similar stuff. In this case, if I understood this correctly, the game was trying to use video compression that Wine does not support well. And so this Proton hack turns off the video compression, and then the game works. And the Proton hack is maybe slightly less hacky, arguably, because it's based off of the Steam game ID environment variable. So when you run the game through Steam, Steam will set this environment variable, and then Wine can check, okay, is the Steam game ID 1113000? And if it is, then we do this weird hack where we turn off the compression. Okay. All right. So how do you actually install this stuff? Well, if you want vanilla Wine or Wine staging, you can get cutting edge packages directly from the Wine project, assuming that you're on Ubuntu, Debian, Fedora, or macOS.
Not Arch.
Not Arch. Arch provides its own packages, and they work great. So the Arch packages are actually always up to date with the latest development version, and it's really nice. You should all use Arch.
So do you use vanilla version yourself?
For the most part, yes, I use vanilla Wine, and then if something doesn't work right, I usually try to fix it on my own. And also, I don't really want to spend money for Crossover. So, for other Linux distributions, use your regular package manager, as we mentioned. BSD and Solaris should work. I have never personally done it, but I have heard of people getting Wine working on BSD and Solaris. Depending on which exact BSD you have, there may even be a package already available for you. Okay, so unless there are any questions, we're going to spend the rest of this presentation just doing demos.
Let's break stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. So
Pray to the demo gods.
So the first demo I want to do is a program called Lewo, and this program I have to play Blu-rays. Does anybody know what happens if you try to play a Blu-ray on Linux?
There's some DRM stuff that stops you from doing it.
Yep. Blu-rays have really nasty DRM. It's not like DVDs. It's much nastier. So I am actually going to show you what happens. I have here this Dune.iso file. This is not the new Dune. It's the old low-budget one that was gifted to me in Blu-ray. So I'm going to open this with VLC. And immediately VLC tells me this Blu-ray disc needs a library for AACS decoding and your system does not have it. I spent many hours trying to figure out how to get this library for AACS decoding and in the end concluded it does not exist. But in my Googling, I found out that there's this nice free Windows program for playing Blu-rays that's called Lewo. And I thought, I wonder if that'll work in Wine. So I have here the installer program for it. And we are going to open this with Wine. And Wine should start right up with it. There it is. Here's the installer. I hit install.
So when you install a program, is it building the wine bottle?
So that dialogue that you saw before this came up, that's the dialogue that appears when it builds the wine bottle. Yeah.
Do you want to teach us about what wine bottles are?
Sure. Yeah. I would have gotten to it eventually, but since you asked.
Sorry.
Okay, so the default location of the wine bottle is in your home directory under .wine. So it created this directory, .wine, that has DOS devices, drive C, and some of these reg files. So these three reg files are the Windows registry in Wine, or for this wine bottle, and that has drive C. And if we look in there, we can see it has program files x86, Windows, users, just like you would find on a Windows system. So this directory contains everything that Wine needs to run a particular Windows program.
So this is the line.
What?
This is where it lies.
Yes.
It's like, yo, I'm Windows.
Okay, well, there's kind of lying on every level here, but this wasn't meant to be an ethical discussion. Okay, no Java runtime environment detected. Would you like to download? No. Open file. Okay, and this is interesting. This is the Wine file open dialog. And we have a My Computer on the left. What is in My Computer? Well, we've got drives with letters, just like Windows. How did that happen?
What the?
So small. Should just describe what we're seeing.
All right. Well, right here is the C drive. That's what we saw in that drive C folder. So under .wine/drive_C. So that's got program files, Windows, all that. The D drive is actually my CD drive. And the Z drive is the Linux root file system. So you can access everything on your file system through the Z drive. So I'm actually not going to navigate through to my home directory through the Z drive because here on the left we have desktop, and desktop is actually symlinked to my Linux desktop.
Sweet. That's
Yeah.
what you would expect.
Yep. So here's Dune.iso. And oh my gosh, it's playing! It's playing! We could actually like watch a video, hopefully without ads.
Very nice.
And it seems to have paused. Oh, there we go. It's just on pause. Okay. My heart stopped for a second. Okay. So, for success story, you can now play your Blu-rays on Linux. Okay, second demo we're going to do is one that a couple of you suggested, Microsoft Office. Can we actually run Microsoft Office on Linux? Well, to do this, we're going to have to use some kind of installer helper. I know for a fact that the regular Microsoft Office installer does not work with Wine directly. So let's see what happens when we run Winetricks help. Winetricks should let us install programs like this, right? Okay, Winetricks help just takes us to the GitHub page. That's actually not what I wanted. Let's just run Winetricks without arguments. Okay, it actually pops up a graphical interface if you aren't without arguments. I find this interface to be kind of obnoxious, and so I'm not going to use this either. But just so you know...
I liked it.
All right, well, if it works for you, great. Like, I mean, if we hit install an application, then it would give us this nice list of all the applications that can install, and we see Office 2013 is in there.
I also like to use the GUI to install my Pac-Man packages, so...
It's okay.
Just use Aura.
You'll grow up one day.
Thanks.
All right. So when I ran it with -- help,
It's mine.
now it's giving me actual information on the command line. It's got lots of interesting options and commands. Okay, this has apps list verbs and category applications, as opposed to DLLs or games or fonts. Okay, well, apps sounds like what we want. Let's do Winetricks apps list. Okay, and was Microsoft Office in here? Look at that. Microsoft Office 2013 Professional. So, yes, we could have done grep Office, you're right. But all right, so let's run Winetricks Office 2013 Pro and see what happens. This package does not work on a 64-bit installation. You must use a prefix made with WineArch equals Win32. Okay, so this is a very important detail. By default, when you create a wine bottle, it's going to be a 64-bit wine bottle. It's going to look like 64-bit Windows and have separate directories for program files and program files x86. Because Windows stores 64-bit executables in program files and 32-bit ones in program files x86. But this particular Winetricks script will not work in a 64-bit wine bottle, so we need to make a 32-bit one. So the way we're going to do that is by setting this wine prefix environment variable to something else. I'm going to call it .wine-office, and that'll make a new wine bottle in .wine/office. Actually, it has to be a fully qualified path, so I'm going to do ~/.wine-office. So that'll create it in my home directory. And I'm going to say WineArch equals Win32. And now I'm going to say Winetricks Office 2013 Pro. Okay, so now it's creating the new wine bottle. Come on.
And it installs Office. Maybe?
It's going. I mean, I've been told to never do live demos because it's just like asking to be cursed. But, but it looks like it is working still.
Made it through one.
While this is working, let's actually look at that wine bottle that it made. So it looks similar to the old one we had, but in Drive C we now only have program files. And the first one, we had program files and program files x86.
That makes sense.
So, all of the wine bottles you make are in the dot wine.
Wherever.
No, they're wherever you put them.
Oh, okay.
So the default one is in your home directory under .wine. I just made a new one that's also in my home directory, but I called it .wine-office.
So put it in the wine cellar?
Yeah.
So what exactly is a wine bottle?
So it's got all the things that you would expect to be there on Windows. So if we look at our wine bottle, so we've got these registry files, we've got DOS devices. That actually defines the relationship between directories in your file system and drive letters.
Can I rephrase my question actually?
Yeah.
What separates wine bottles from each other except the program running in them?
So when wine is running, you have to tell wine which wine bottle it's using. And then any program that wine runs will think that drive C is in a particular place. Okay?
So it sounds like a CH root for Linux, right?
Yeah, it's a lot like a CH root. Except it has that backdoor through the Z drive where you can get out and look at anything.
Yeah.
You look perplexed.
You probably explained it thoroughly, but I still don't understand, but that's probably not your fault.
There's a question from Discord.
Okay.
The question is, on the earlier slide, you put that there were some parts of Proton that were closed source. Do you happen to know what is closed source on Proton?
So the integration with Steam is closed source, but Proton itself is necessarily open source.
Because of the wine's copyleft.
Yep, exactly. So to maybe answer your question a little bit better, I've got all these files in this .wine bottle right here that are not in my other wine bottle. So if I were to open a file explorer from within wine and then ask it to look at the C drive, it's going to see different things.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Do you have to configure that each time, or?
So you only have to set that wine prefix variable if you want a wine bottle that's not in the default location. You could just have one wine bottle for all your stuff, and theoretically it would work fine. The trouble happens when you need to use workarounds in order to get a particular piece of software working. Like Office needs to be run in a 32-bit wine bottle.
Or you like the sandboxing and you want to keep your applications separate from each other.
Yeah, because normally Windows application isn't going to go digging through your Z drive because it doesn't expect there to be a Z drive. So for all intents and purposes, it would think that it's the only application installed on the computer. And it wouldn't be able to touch data from other ones.
Cool.
I mean, technically it could, but probably wouldn't. Okay, let's see if this works. All right, we've got the Office setup program.
Do you really accept all of that?
I don't know. I trust that, you know. I trust that if they hold it against me, it won't hold up in court.
Just delete the bottle. It's clean.
So all that stuff logging, those are little hacks.
Say that again?
All the stuff that's showing up on the screen in the console, those are little hacks, the little fix-me's.
So those are actually fix-me's that Wine prints. So when a program calls a function that Wine has not fully implemented, Wine will usually print a fix-me message saying like, hey, this function might not have worked correctly. And that helps Wine developers know where to direct their attention when something is not working. Okay, so this is a crash dialog. this is what happens when wine crashes. This looks really similar to the Windows crash dialog. If we hit show details, it'll actually give us a back trace of, you know, which specific function the crash happened in. We're just going to ignore this and hope that it doesn't matter.
It does.
I think
Maybe.
wine stands for liar bar.
Okay, so command wine isetup.exe returns status 67. No. Okay, so something went wrong. I don't know what went wrong. This worked the last time I tried it. We're just going to try it again, and if it does not work a second time, we'll give up. But
So, as a web developer, would you prefer, would you say isolate all of your individual apps, or would it be better to run everything in one bottle if it's only like a limited amount?
it totally depends on what you're doing. Like, I would say that when you're just starting, definitely just run everything in the same wine bottle. It'll be easier for you. You will confuse yourself less. Anyone have any witty jokes?
Have you been able to run Adobe software online, like Photoshop?
I have not personally tried. There might be Winetricks verbs for that. Let's see. I'll use grep Adobe. So it looks like there are Winetricks helpers for Adobe Digital Editions, at least, the 2015 version. I'm not sure how well the other stuff runs. I mean, there's a chance that it'll just work and you won't need a helper at all. But
So give it a try.
yeah, definitely.
Does it matter which Linux distro it's on? Does it, as far as compatibility?
So I don't know for sure because it used to be that the answer was yes, specifically because of GStreamer plugins, where not all distributions would package 32-bit GStreamer libraries, and a 32-bit program running on Wine needed to be able to use 32-bit GStreamer libraries to run. But that problem, there is definitely a plan for solving that problem, and that plan may have already been implemented. So if that's already been implemented in Wine, then Wine no longer depends on 32-bit libraries from the system, and we'll just use the 64-bit libraries regardless of whether the Windows program is a 32-bit or a 64-bit program. So I'm sorry that I don't know what the exact status of that is.
So you think I'll be okay with Ubuntu?
Most likely, yes. Yeah. All right. So this just died again, and I don't know why. So I'm gonna give up on running Office through Winetricks for the moment, even though I promise you all that this worked on Tuesday. We're instead going to try running it through Crossover. So Crossover is a commercial product. It's a little more polished, right? Let's see if this works better. So Crossover has this beautiful little GUI, has a button, install Windows software, select application, and actually it's already selected from the last time I did this, but if we were to search for Office, you can see it has several different versions of Microsoft Office that it supports. The newest one that it supports is 2016. So this is a limitation of Wine where new stuff tends to not work. It tends to take quite a while for Wine or even Crossover to pick up support for an application. So if you are running Office on Linux, it's going to be an old version of Office. I don't have an Office 26 installer file, so I'm just going to do the 2013 installer again. Okay, and continue. It says it runs well, 4 stars, great. And this install will stop working in 15 days. Please pay for a license. Well, not today. Okay, then
I've got an Office 2010 installer.
That should work fine. Yeah, I'm pretty sure 2010 was on the list as well. You'd honestly probably have better luck the older the version of Office is. So maybe decide how old of a version you can get away with. Okay, so here's installer thing again. Hit install. And I do remember this took a while the last time I did it. So.
There was a question on Discord. Potato asked, say you accidentally open something malicious in Wine. Let's say it wants to do very bad things on your Z drive that's mapped to the root of your Linux side. Is there anything to protect the Linux side?
So you can turn off the Z drive, but even then, like your home folder is still going to be symlinked into the C drive. So if you are like trying to do malware analysis, you really need to do it in a VM regardless of whether you're using Wine. How many people in here are already Linux users?
Primary
or basically
know how to? Dual boot, okay?
Dual boot counts. So I should have prepared some humorous anecdote to tell during the long stretches in the talk.
So let's say you're running, Office on Wine, using Wine with on a Linux distro. Is it going to take more resources or less resources than would just on Windows?
That's a very good question. Would Office take more or less system resources on Wine than on Windows? My suspicion is that it's going to take less resources, but that's largely because Wine is missing a lot of pieces. So, like when you load a DLL file, or when a program, depends on a DLL file, it says, I need this DLL file loaded into memory in order to function. All of the functions inside of that DLL get loaded into memory, not just the ones that the program needs. So because Wine doesn't implement a lot of uncommonly used functions, you would save RAM that way. But if the program actually needed that functionality, it wouldn't be there. So
It's rid of some of the fluff, right?
yeah, but then also because you have more translation you usually have more translation going from application down to kernel if you're going through Wine, because Wine has to keep track of stuff through the Wine server, for example, or there's just more indirection, like you have to call the Wine server and then the Wine server calls into the kernel instead of being able to just do a syscall directly like you would in Windows. Well, actually, even in Windows, you wouldn't do it directly. You would call like an NTDLL function that would do the syscall for you. But there's much less steps between you and the kernel on Windows than there would be on Wine, so that could certainly slow things down. So it's a mixed bag, and really you just got to try it and see if it works for you and your particular application. All right, so this installed, and we can see in the crossover launcher I've got all these Office programs now. And if I look in my KDE Start menu, I see they've also appeared there. Great. So let's see if I can actually run one of these. Ah, come on. PowerPoint can't do this because a dialog box is open. Okay,
It won't really do much unless you log in to activate it.
that's fine. I just want to show you that I can browse my computer. Maybe. Unless it just, nope, there we go. You go over to desktop. All files. No. Oh, my Linux desktop. So crossover seems to have made a distinction between the crossover desktop and your real desktop that Wine wouldn't make. So I'll go to my Linux desktop, Wine presentation. And look at that, we could do the rest of the presentation in PowerPoint.
Presentationception.
Something like that. I'm not sure if I caught the reference. Okay, so it works. You can use real Microsoft Office on Linux now. All right, next demo, we're going to do Reader Rabbit. So this is an old game that I downloaded from some retro gaming website, and it came as this zip file. So the first thing I'm going to do is extract the zip file and see what we've got here. And that is not the file browser, so I apparently have my file associations a little messed up. Let's go to desktop here, Reader Rabbit. Okay, have this game files, and this file right here ends in .bin. This one ends in .cue. So this is not like an ordinary CD ISO file. This is a different format. And the program you can use to open these files is called CDEMU, and it has a nice GUI for KDE. So I'm going to open the KDE CDEMU manager, and then I just select one of those files. And as soon as it's selected, that CDEMU mounted it as a normal device. Okay, great. So now I've got in run media Alex RR baby this seb.exe file. By the way, this is not the normal Reader Rabbit. This is Reader Rabbit Playtime for Baby. And the reason why we're using this version of Reader Rabbit, actually there's two reasons. The first one is this is Bash's favorite version of Reader Rabbit. And second, it demonstrates some kind of common workarounds that you have to do to get old software like this working. All right, so actually I don't even need to use the console for this. I can just right-click sep.exe, say open with Wine. Do you want to install? Yes.
Is installing Reader Rabbit baby?
I haven't seen this installer.
Reader Rabbit,
Yeah.
Playtime for Baby.
Yeah.
We spent a long time working on this game. It was like a whole weekend.
All right, so the installer ran right up until choose destination, and it said there is not enough disk space to install Reader Rabbit Playtime for Baby. Please free, this looks like about 2 gigabytes of space in the C drive, or select a different drive. Okay, I have more than 2 gigabytes of free space in my CD drive. The problem is not my drive. The problem is that this software was designed for a time when drives are much smaller. It has some kind of overflow problem, making it think that there's not enough disk space available. Okay, so we're going to exit out of this. And how are we going to fix this?
More line to line? Just a theory.
That was a rhetorical question, but you can answer it anyway, Bash.
Oh, wine 32 bottle.
For starters, yes. So I'm actually just going to wipe out the bottles that we made before, and I'm going to start over. Okay? So we do need a 32-bit bottle here, but a 32-bit bottle is not enough. What we really need to do is to change the Windows version that Wine reports. So Wine comes with this program called Wine CFG, and when we run it, it gives us lots of options for controlling the behavior of the wine bottle. And this option right here is which Windows version does it report to running applications. But it doesn't go farther back than Windows XP. Well, why is that? Because this is a 64-bit wine bottle, and Windows XP was the first version of Windows to support 64-bit. So we need a 32-bit wine bottle. So let's wipe that out again. We're going to do wine arch equals win32, and now run wine CFG.
Why wine arch? Is that just because it's arch for distro?
No, architecture. So that the name of that environment variable is the same whether you're running on Ubuntu or Fedora or whatever. It's the CPU architecture that Wine is using in the wine bottle. So,
sorry, I'm asking too many questions.
So our modern x86 machines can run code that was written for older 32-bit x86 processors. And whether you have a 32-bit x86 processor or a 64-bit one, those are considered two different architectures. Okay? It's a good question. Okay, so now that we've got this, running in a 32-bit wine bottle, we see we've got lots of options all the way back to Windows 2.0. I'm going to select Windows 95 for this, and now I'm going to go back and run this again. And I don't have to run it from the command line. I don't have to set any environment variables because I'm just using the default wine bottle location. And it was set to a 32-bit bottle when I created it, so it will be a 32-bit bottle forever. Okay, so let's try this again. Do you want to install? Yes.
We're going to get so much value out of this game once it plays.
I'm really hoping to see with the FPS.
It's better than Windows.
I want to see it side by side if we could.
Okay. It asked me if I want to install some spyware from the 90s. I don't. It probably doesn't even work anymore. But
Someone sitting in front of a server, all of a sudden it lights up that they have a new victim. 5 years since the last one.
Installation is complete. Okay. Do you want to register? Maybe later. All right. Audio's obviously working. Okay.
Why are you turning it down?
Why am I turning it down, he asks. Okay, and slight problem. The interface seems to have frozen.
Linux issues.
Well-
Exit the setup application that likes to sit on top of everything else.
You gotta hit
There we go. Exit setup. Okay. All right, great. Now we can hit play, and hear sound, but I don't see anything. We have a problem. Okay, so let's try alt-tabbing out of this. Okay. I'm gonna close it. So what went wrong here? Okay. Well, for one thing, it has messed up my display configuration.
If you get it closed, it'll actually.
Oh my gosh.
It's still there somewhere.
I know I can't close it. I don't think I can close it until the.
Eject the disk. See what happens.
Here.
Fill it in the task manager.
Okay. I've got my display back. What the
Close
command
the
I'm going to run right now is wine server -k. This should kill all running wine applications. Okay, it worked. I've got my computer back.
That command was the main reason I did this.
Okay, so for starters, I really don't like that it took over my screen. So I'm going to go into Wine CFG and go into desktop, or no, not desktop, graphics, emulate a virtual desktop. And what this option does is it puts all of your Wine programs in a window rather than letting them change the actual screen resolution. So let's try this again real quick. Let's see if that improves anything else. Open with Wine. Oh, that's so much better. It's now perfectly contained in this nice little window. And I just ran the setup instead of the real program. Did it install a program icon?
Oh look, it gave you an AOL trial on your desktop.
So who knows what version that icon is? I guess that's like 4.0 or 5.0, 5.0.
I wish I knew. Okay, well, let's just go straight into the wine bottle and see if we can find this thing's files. Okay, the Learning Company, Rita Rabbit Playtime, our baby. Actually, I'm not sure. Huh. I think it might actually have to run off the CD.
It does.
Okay, that's fine. So we'll go over to our mounted CD image, and I guess I'll just run the installer again.
That's what it does. Do you want to Oh, is it going to actually install it again?
It probably dropped a shortcut on your virtual desktop where it actually goes.
No, because Wine integrated the desktop from the wine bottle with my real desktop. So if it appeared, it would have appeared right next to the AOL icon. So I'm.
Oh, you got the spyware.
Oh crap!
You got the spyware.
Learned more about using you AOL over Rita Rabbit.
And I got 2 AOL.
Oh great! Yeah, now there are 2 of them.
Icon in the learning. Oh, so it's in the learning program group. So it creates it in the start menu.
So if I look for, oh yeah, I was right there this whole time. Well. Oh well, at least now it's giving me the option.
You gotta close the installer.
Really? All right, fine. Let's do wine server -k again. Closed everything. Okay, now Reader Rabbit Playtime for Baby from the start menu, and register later. Play. Okay, well I think the situation has improved. I mean, it didn't take over my display this time. It's still black though.
Can we hear stuff?
If I turn my volume up, I think so. Maybe. Wrong volume icon. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. It's definitely working.
We can't see nothing.
Other than the black screen. Okay, so how can we fix this? Well, Bash actually figured this out. I did not know this, but Winetricks has a bunch of options for adjusting different wine settings that you can't adjust through Wine CFG. And whoops.
Oh, you were just fine. You could have just clicked install application.
I don't even think the GUI has the
It does.
settings menu. It does? Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter.
Winetricks settings list, okay? Whoops. I think I missed the word list. Yeah, it keeps...
No, it's in there, it's in there. You can do it. Just scroll down. Stewie, come on. You're looking for a renderer.
This is so painful for me, Matt. Okay, so this one, render equals GDI. This changes the graphics API that Wine uses by default. So the options we see are GDI, GL, no 3D acceleration, and Vulkan. Vulkan is not going to work for a game from the 90s. GL is probably not going to work either.
And that's what it uses by default is GL.
Okay. I did not...
For this game.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's right. It does default to GL, at least for this game. So no 3D might work, but GDI is probably the most likely one to work. GDI was a Windows graphics API that pretty sure it predates DirectX.
Does.
Yeah.
I think you have to check it. Oh no, you did it.
I did check it. See, now it dropped me into a different menu. Okay, did that actually work? Let's find out. So, because Wine is replicating a Windows environment, it has a registry. It also comes with a registry editor. So you can type regedit.
Do you have to type Wine regedit, or can you just do straight?
No, you can just do straight regedit.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, and it'll open the Wine registry editor, which is a clone of the Windows registry editor. So if that Winetrick setting worked, it should have set a particular registry key that Wine looks for to know which graphics API to use. So it should be under current user software Wine.
Direct 3D.
Yeah. Yep, there it is, renderer GDI. Okay. So we actually could have opened regedit and created this registry key ourselves if we wanted to, but Winetricks made it a lot easier because it's just one command on the command line or point and click through the GUI. Alright, so let's see if the game behaves better now.
While we wait, there's a question. What if you want the renderer to be NOD instead of GDI? I don't know what NOD is.
Was that no 3D?
It was no 3D.
No 3D.
I don't know what would happen. We could try it. That was an option in Winetricks, but hey, look, the game's working. Look at that!
This took us a whole weekend to figure out.
Endless hours of entertainment. You guys can throw out your Xboxes. This is all you need. Okay, do you want to stop playing? Yes. Okay, so let's actually try that other rendering just to see what happens. I have not tried that before. So that was no 3D. So if I say Winetricks render equals no 3D.
I guess the NOD was a joke. From Command and Conquer.
See, I don't actually play video games because I spend all my time trying to get them to start to begin with. Okay. I am really curious to see what happens with no 3D. Hey, that works too. Okay. All right.
Are we gonna play the game?
Yeah, let's play it. No.
Maybe when we're done with the other demos. Fair enough. Okay, I have one more demo I wanted to show you. It's a game I found called Secret World Legends. I've never actually played it, hadn't heard of it before, but it is an interesting one to get working. So, I have here the installer, Secret World Legends.exe, and actually the first thing I'm going to do is...
clean your bottle.
Yeah. I'm going to delete that wine bottle that had Reader Rabbit in it. I don't want to use a 32-bit bottle for this. I want the default 64-bit one. Okay, so we're going to open this game installer with wine. Okay, here's the setup. Great.
Breaking everything I have
And it crashed. Okay, this is not the wine crash dialog. This thing obviously has its own crash handler. It's asking me to send a bug report to the developers, which I'm sure would really make them scratch their heads. So something went wrong here, and I have no idea what went wrong. What can I do? Well, I can do what I should have done from the beginning. I should have looked up the game in the Wine application database. So the Wine project has a website where they collect information about what programs work well in Wine and what programs do not. So I'm going to search for this game, Secret World Legends. And I'm going to see if there's any information in here that might be useful. So first result says its rating is platinum, meaning that there are no problems whatsoever. I don't see any information that might explain my problem. So what about the next result? Or, oh, a few down here we have Secret World Legends installer fails. This looks promising. So this takes me ultimately to a Wine bug report. And right in the title of the Wine bug report, it says Winetricks Q D3D compiler _47 works around. So what happens if we run that command? All right, it finished. So let's try this again. Open with Wine. It did create the icon on the desktop though, so it got at least that far. Previous version of Secret Worlds has been detected. Would you like to cancel? No.
Oh, no error.
No error. And hey, look, the installers now continue to the next step. So, moral of the story is there is some great help to be found by looking through the application database. All right, I'm actually going to cancel this unless anybody really wants to play this game.
No. Let's go play Brood War instead.
Brood War runs
No,
great.
let's play Reader Rabbit.
Yeah, Reader Rabbit. Protect your baby.
If you're installing Brood War, you can do a CD key of all threes. It won't give you BattleNet, but it'll let you play local on LAN.
Yes. There's actually one other thing that I should have done earlier while you were all squinting to see the screen. If you look under graphics, it has a DPI slider. I can actually turn that up, and then programs I run get scaled up.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
All right, apologies for making you all squint, but at least now you know. So you can find a whole bunch of fun, interesting old games off the Internet Archive. If you go to archive.org and hit the floppy disk icon, they've got hundreds of thousands of old games and programs that might run great under Wine, and you'll never have to buy a new video game ever again. They have like every version of Reader Rabbit in there.
Question.
Yeah?
Say you build a nice wine bottle, right? And you just share the bottle.
You could, yeah. You could zip it up, send it to somebody else.
And then, so what matters in that sense? Does like distribution matter? Like say somebody's running Ubuntu and you're running Arch. If you send them that wine bottle, is it going to work just like normal, or is it going to break? Or
It should work fine. If you have very different Wine versions, like if one person is using, a wine version from 3 years ago and the other one's using a version from 3 weeks ago, I could see that maybe causing a problem. But certainly if you are running the same version of wine, then distribution shouldn't matter.
So we can create an underground wine bottle trading trading game here.
And the state of Utah will regulate it.
One wine cellar.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so very last slide I have, getting help. In addition to the wine AppDB site, the Wine Project runs a forum. The forum is actually surprisingly helpful. So if you post on the forum, there is a decent chance that somebody out there will be able to help you with your wine problem. And you can also write bugs and submit bugs to Wines Bugzilla.
To get ignored.
Well, if you write a better bug report, if you write a very nice bug report that has all the steps that you need to reproduce the problem and a download link and maybe a screenshot, then it's much more likely to get attention than somebody filing a bug report saying, my program didn't work. And I have actually read numerous wine bug reports where somebody posts, my program didn't work, it was broken, and did not even say which program they were running. So yeah, if you want attention, write good bug reports. This is true in like basically every aspect of life. Actually, no, there's no case when you should write a bad bug report.
All right.
Don't do that to your worst enemy.
So we have some questions on the Discord for you if you're ready for them.
Yeah, sure.
What were some of your favorite bugs that you fixed?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. I'm trying to remember what I have fixed now. I spent quite a while getting the original StarCraft campaign editor to work well. It would open in Wine, but the menus worked really weird. Like they would open and close when they weren't supposed to, and the thing was kind of unusable. It also displayed a wine glass icon instead of the campaign editor icon, and I got that fixed. Man, what else? I got the launcher for a game that my brother-in-law wanted to run, I think, to work. That was interesting because the launcher was actually an HTML page that was being displayed in a window, and it used an image map to detect when you had clicked on the play button, but the image map link support was just not present in Wine, and so I wound up digging through both like Firefox COM code and Windows COM code and trying to figure out how you make one go to the other. And that was kind of interesting.
What about the Internet Explorer one? Tell that one.
Oh gosh. So a lot of the patches I've submitted in Wine have just been adding new functions that don't actually do anything. It turns out that a lot of times programs will call a function but then not really care what the function does. And so you can just return 0 or null or something, and the program will just continue, like, no problem. And the same is true for entire DLLs, actually. So I had added a new DLL to Wine to make some program work. I don't remember what. And then later on, somebody here asked me, hey, can you run Internet Explorer in Wine? I'm like, of course you can. There's a Wine tricks for it. And so we opened up Internet Explorer, and he's like, nothing works because all of the SSL certificates are too new and everything uses HTTPS. So we're thinking, well, what website can we go to that doesn't use HTTPS? And he thinks, Baidu. And so we go to Baidu. and it crashes Internet Explorer. And I look at the backtrace, and it turns out that once the Internet Explorer used to work fine because that DLL wasn't there. But once I added that DLL, Internet Explorer tried calling functions in that DLL that weren't implemented, and then it would crash. So I wound up like feeling very embarrassed that, you know, we're trying to do this demo and then I realized that it crashes due to a problem that I myself had caused a few months earlier. But I fixed it. It's fine. You can run Internet Explorer in Wine now, although that's really a horrible idea for a lot of reasons.
One more question. So let's say you open something malicious in Wine, and it decides it wants to do very bad things to the Z drive that's mapped to your Linux side.
Right.
Is there anything you can do to protect your Linux side?
So you should be able to turn off the Z drive in Wine CFG. If you go to drives, Z, remove.
Okay.
And now if we run like Wine Explorer, okay, we've got a file browser now, and yeah, the Z drive is now gone. But my desktop and my documents and everything are still symlinked. So
there's that.
I mean, you could set up a wine bottle that doesn't have any of those symlinks, and I'm not aware of a way a Windows program could escape from the wine bottle without any symlinks. But
probably a bug in Wine.
Well,
that'd be weird. You write a Windows malware to target Wine.
So if the malware was aware of Wine, then it could go looking for the actual Unix libraries that are loaded into memory and call functions in those, and then obviously if you like get a directory Linux from the standard C library, it's going to give you the real file system. But the program would have to know to go looking for that.
Any other questions? Anything more from you?
No. I'm happy to stick around if there's any particular software you want to try together. I'm all ears.
All right, thank you. Yeah.